Good morning, everybody. We do have a few requests for bill introductions. We'll start with Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members committee. I'd like to introduce Senate Bill, or actually RS number 2305, and it's act concerning or relating to contracts and investments requiring Kansas Public Employees Retirement System to divest from investments in entities that boycott energy companies and prohibiting state contracts without written verification that a company is not boycotting energy companies. You've heard about the environmental, social, and government standards, ESG standards. It has negative impacts on the utilities actually here in the state of Kansas and addresses that. And I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here. Have you checked with Capers on any investments? So there are some out there?
There are some out there, and I've talked with the new chairman of Capers, and he is in favor of this bill, as are some other proponents as well. They see that this is going to create, or what is happening with the ESG standards is creating a malinvestment in energy across the state, and this will hopefully begin to address that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Any objection? Thank you for bringing this bill. With no objection, we'll make the request.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First bill is 22 RS 3181. This is a fully refundable classroom supplies reimbursement for teachers.
Committee, any questions? Senator, that was my bill.
I know, and I'm going to give you credit for it too if we ever work it.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Maybe we'll have an amendment, Madam Chair, that calls it the Tyson-Holland committee bill.
Holy cow, I think I would go for Scalia Ginsburg instead, but committee, any questions on the bill? Seeing none, that's an inside joke. We had a constituent that was up here, committee, and they saw us in the hall talking and getting along, and they said, boy, we're going to label you guys the Ginsburg Scalia of the Capitol, just to make it clear. But no objection, we'll make the bill request.
Madam Chair, why do you always call yourself the Scalia in the relationship? And then I have a second bill introduction, Madam Chair.
Senator Holland.
21 RS 1709. This is duty to disclose legislation.
Any questions? Committee, seeing none, any objection to the bill request? Seeing none, we'll make the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee.
Committee, I have one. It's a resolution for a constitutional amendment on tax, RS number 2949. Any questions on the request? Any objection to the request? Seeing none, we'll make the request. Committee, I have a second one on standard deduction, increasing it 25% across the board. Any questions? Any objection to the request? Seeing none, we'll make the request. Are there any other requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, committee will move on to the next item in the agenda, is a hearing on Senate Bill 463. Amelia, will you give us an overview?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill number 463 relates to sales and compensating use tax and would provide a remittance credit to retailers in an amount equal to 1.5% of such remittance. The total amount of the credit for each month shall not exceed $300 for each retailer, and the bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, questions for Amelia? Seeing none, we'll start the hearing with Don McNeely. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Don McNeely. I serve as president of the Kansas Automobile Dealers Association. state trade association, which represents all the franchise new car and truck dealers. Needless to say, I do appear this morning in support of Senate Bill 463. Our industry as a whole represents about 20% of the retail trade in the state of Kansas. In fiscal year 2020, for example, our industry collected over $458 million in sales tax on annual sales of $6.2 billion. Not only do the dealers have to collect sales and use tax on the sale, lease, parts, fixed operations in terms of servicing a vehicle, but due to our annual tax liability, we also get the privilege of paying our sales tax ahead of time. Needless to say, we are very much in support of this bill. While it may not be as attractive as Missouri, where it's 2% of the amount collected with no cap, this is a start in the right direction, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Committee, any questions? Senator Hall.
I'm just curious, does your association have a position on the legislature's desire to cut the sales tax on food?
No, we haven't even discussed that in any of our meetings, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, we'll try to stay on topic today. Don, I am going to clarify something. You do not have to pay your sales tax in advance. You only pay on the sales tax of the items sold.
Pay a deposit based upon the previous year's tax liability.
Yeah, that came up last year, and it's not accurate. I don't want to put Kathleen on the spot, but we have had several conversations on this, and current statute is you pay the actual sales tax amount.
Okay.
Kathleen, would you mind addressing the committee on that real quick? This is very important, committee.
Yes, because I was in the impression that if your tax liability exceeded $32,000.
Don, would you let her address that? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kathleen.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. The legislation does provide for those that are now in this accelerated filing status that they will pay, probably it would be best to give an example. So for the January, let's go with the January sales is due February 25th. For those that are in the accelerated filing status, for that February 25th return, they will be including the second half of the January sales and the first half of the February sales, which in that case, all of those taxes should have been collected when the sale was made. That return is due February 25th, and the payment for those two halves would be due February 25th. Now, if they choose to, they can do the actual, but the legislation also does provide that they can estimate if they would like to.
Thank you, Kathleen. And that clarification is important, and it would impact people that would be interested in this bill to 463. So that's why I thought it pertinent to bring you up now. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. Our next conferee is Dan Murray. Committee will move on. Scott Schneider. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Scott Schneider, Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association. I think Don summed up the bill fairly well, and we would support being a part of it. What I put together in testimony today is, obviously we're going to support it, but I want to explain why we're going to support it. It is an interesting topic of how we collect taxes and where the duties lie and what costs are associated with collecting those taxes. And the state of Washington did an interesting survey that I attached to my testimony that I think is worth looking at, and it breaks down the costs associated with large retailers, medium and small. And as you can imagine, the smaller you are, the harder it is to manage these processes, whether it's a point of sale system, whether it's credit card fees, down the line. And they broke it down in a very nice chart that I included for your review. It is an issue that we struggle with. Kansas uses the stick more than the carrot. Other states have been more toward the carrot, and how that relationship exists is something that I think deserves attention, and this bill begins us on that path. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Committee, any questions for Scott? Seeing none, thank you. Eric Stafford? Committee will move on. I'll draw your attention to Dan and Eric's testimony. We have written only from Tim McKee, Corey Peterson, Becky Schartz, and Randy Stuckey. Is there anybody else that would like to testify for the bill? Seeing none, opponents testifying. Committee, we do not have any opponents, oral or written. Is there anybody that would like to testify against the bill? Seeing none. Committee, we do not have any neutral testimony either. Is there anybody that would like to testify neutral on the bill? Seeing none. Committee, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 463. Next item on the agenda is the hearing on Senate Bill 432.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 432 would establish an annual 4-day sales tax holiday for back-to-school related sales of certain school supplies, personal computers, and clothing beginning in August of '22. The bill would provide a sales tax exemption for back-to-school related sales of clothing, accessories or equipment, school supplies, school instructional materials, school art supplies, pre-written computer software, personal computers, and school computer supplies during the period beginning at 12:01 a.m. on the first Thursday in August and ending on midnight of the Sunday following that. So it's the first weekend of August. Definitions of those terms are provided in subsection B of the bill. There are also administrative provisions included to administer the sales tax holiday, and the bill would take effect from and after publication in the Kansas Register.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Our first conferee would be Senator Peck. I would welcome you to the committee, but no need.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No, I'm already here. I appreciate that. And I hope I don't unwelcome myself. But my understanding, committee, is that today is the chairman of the Taxation Committee's birthday. Now, I was shocked to learn that she was turning 39 years of age because I thought she was much, much younger than that. But so when you get an opportunity, you could sing happy birthday. I thought about it, but I thought, well, that may not go over so well. And I certainly wouldn't want that to be recorded and played back home if I was singing happy birthday to the chair of the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee. So I will not do that. But I will now get to my testimony, and happy birthday, Madam Chairman, 39 years of age. I remember when I turned 39 years of age, +1. Well, you're ahead of me then. All right, as it relates to Senate Bill 432, this is not a new concept. It has been discussed several times in the Kansas Legislature while I was a member of the Kansas House. It actually passed the House on about 4 different occasions, but it always stalled in the Senate. So I thought, I'm in the Senate. The Senate knows now what they're doing, not because I'm here, but because the Senate has had an opportunity to change several personnel. Hopefully we can get this taken care of on the Senate side. Simply stated, Senate Bill 432 is a way to save money for Kansas parents, grandparents, and teachers as they're preparing to get their students or children or grandchildren back into school. It is 4 days, and I specifically along with Senator Dahl, who has worked with me on this, wanted 4 days because this gives us a jump start over other states. So we have 1 additional day at 4 days. You can see in the bill and in my testimony there's specifically mentioned what is sales tax exempt. I won't go over that because you can read that. By my account, or by my count, there are some 17 other states that have a back-to-school sales tax holiday in one form or another. Some of them are somewhat restrictive, some of them are fairly generous. This legislation is fairly generous because it does not put a dollar cap on purchases like some states do. Our neighbors to the east, Missouri, implemented a back-to-school sales tax holiday in 2004. So we have been missing out on a lot of money since 2004. To the south of us, Oklahoma in 2007. Now, I did some research on the Oklahoma because I can walk to Oklahoma from my house. Well, you could walk to Oklahoma from your house. It might just take you a long time, but mine's not such a long walk. Anyway, when the Oklahoma legislature passed their legislation to provide a sales tax holiday, the lead proponent was a Democrat senator from southern Oklahoma. And it was bipartisan when Oklahoma passed it. Now, the reason they passed it, and his argument was, our neighbors to the south, Texas, are taking advantage of our citizens, and we are losing or bleeding a lot of money into Texas. So they passed it in 2007. And then Kansas now, we are bleeding to the east and to the south. During those sales tax holidays, which would be the same days, except we would have an extra day, a lot of citizens from Kansas are traveling to our neighboring states. I remember when Missouri had a sales tax holiday and Kansas did not. I'm a good hour and 15 minutes from the state line in Missouri. We had a lot of citizens that would travel to Joplin, Missouri during that first weekend in August to save a few dollars on back-to-school supplies. Drive an hour and 15 minutes. Of course, they would spend the day there, and while they were there, they would spend make additional purchases that were not sales tax exempt, as well as, because Kansas has a higher motor vehicle fuel tax than Missouri, they would definitely fill up their vehicle with fuel. And while they were gone for several hours, they would get hungry, so they would eat at the local restaurant. I would ask you not to look at this legislation as what might Kansas lose in sales tax revenue, but what will Kansas gain by incentivizing our citizens and even some of our neighboring states to make purchases in Kansas for back-to-school supplies. Because again, citizens, when they get out and about, they start shopping, they spend money that they didn't intend to on items that are not sales tax exempt. So I believe it is a gain for the state of Kansas. Now, I disagree with the fiscal note that the Department of Revenue has put on this. I've always disagreed with their fiscal note on this legislation, and I've been a proponent of it for several years. But I did really appreciate, and I would draw your attention to something that is in the fiscal note. I put it in my testimony. I don't generally read testimony, but I thought that it would be beneficial to read this. It says in part, data from other states indicate that there is an increase in purchases during a sales tax holiday that ranges from slight to a 5-fold increase in purchases. And then as it goes on, as they're making their assumption, in the fiscal note, it is assumed that sales during the 4-day period would be at least triple the normal purchases. And then they go on to say with corresponding decreases in sales volume before and after the sales tax period. We understand that. I mean, there's no secret. People will delay their purchases until the sales tax holiday, or they will make purchases during the sales tax holiday that they wouldn't otherwise. Again, my whole focus here, committee, is to provide our citizens a tax break and keep them shopping in the state of Kansas. I would ask the committee to pass this legislation out favorably. And Madam Chairman, I will be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Senator. Committee questions. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Peck, thank you for being here today. And I know this is something near and dear to you, so just some questions. Number one, with your implementation of this as outlined in the bill, is this streamlined sales tax compliant or not?
Thank you for that question, Senator Holland. I appreciate it. And the answer is I do not know. And the reason that I put it that way, there's a short little revisor that's been a part of the writing tax legislation for many years. I asked him this question. He's now the head revisor about is the legislation that I'd introduced previously streamlined compliant. He said, I think so, but it's a moving target. It sometimes is hard to hit. So my answer, if you said you have to answer yes or no, I'm going to say probably not, but I'm certainly willing to make it streamlined compliant to get this across the finish line.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple more follow-up questions then. Senator, could you find out definitively from Gordon Revisor, Gordon himself, what he thinks of this, since he's our head revisor? And could you also see what impacts have had to Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas as regarding their streamline? Because sometimes people say it's not compliant, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. I'd like to know what those other states are going. My second question would be, Madam Chair,
It's your third.
Well, we're here to vet policy, right?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, Senator, but with respect. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm just asking questions.
And the procedure is that you ask
Can I ask
the
a
chair
question,
and the
Madam
chair
Chair?
direct to the, yes, you may.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I thought I asked that before. So my next question would be, Senator, is that per family, what would you say a typical family is going to save sales tax dollars wise if we implemented this?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Holland, I honestly don't know. It just depends on the number of children in the family. And again, this would not be just for families, but also be for our teachers as they're purchasing back to school supplies. So it would just depend on how much they spend. If they spend $100, it's $6.50. If they spend $10,000, it's, well, what would that be? A lot more.
Senator Holland.
So, Madam Chair, Senator, I guess my question would be is that based upon if you have nothing else, if we went back and went to the fiscal note you disagree with, can you just bring back for the committee at some later time what per family that figures out to? I just want to know. And then a final question, Madam Chair.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I also want to know is that have you reached out to NFIB or the chamber as far as, and I have no idea because I use Square, it wouldn't be a big deal for me, not that my wine is a school supply, so it wouldn't impact my business anyway. But what would be the impact to our merchants on having to, if they got to reprogram, whatever, I don't know, from small mom and pops up to the Walmarts, just what's the impact of that? Could you quantify that, or can we get any feedback from industry on that? Thank you, Madam Chair. That's my final question.
Thank you. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To answer the first part of your question, this time I did not reach out to the chamber or NFIB. I have in years past. They have previously always been supportive of the legislation. And the impact that it would have on large retailers is almost non-existent. It's a matter of programming into their system that these particular items are tax exempt. So if you are at a big box store and you're purchasing a lot of items, the items that are back to school sales tax would not be taxed where the other would. Smaller retailers, generally our business owners are fairly resilient and they want to compete, particularly on our border areas, with neighboring states, and they're willing to put forth a little extra effort to get the shoppers in their state or in their business. And so I haven't asked. I'd be happy to check with NFIB and see if their retailers have any concern with implementation.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Peck, thanks for being here today on this particular issue. Just thinking through this mechanically a little bit more, and apparently you have some information from other states, and Catherine probably does as well. For those retailers that may have missed the notification for adjustment or for anything purchased that had been taxed, does the person being taxed, are they allowed to appeal to the Department of Revenue for any adjustment thereof in any way, shape, or form?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Solentrop. I really don't have an answer to that. My position would be most likely retailers would be aware of it, but shoppers certainly would be aware of it, and I would believe they would ask the retailer, but I don't believe there is in this legislation any recourse for purchasers to go to the Department of Revenue and say, hey, I was charged sales tax on these items that are tax exempt. I believe it would be something they would ask the retailer and go back to them. But if that is something that is a challenge, this legislation, I'm willing to work with anyone to amend it in any way to help get it across the finish line.
Thank you. Any other questions? So Senator Peck, when I was a freshman in the House, I worked with you on this legislation, and the fiscal note came back exorbitantly high. I haven't had a chance to do it on this one, but the fiscal note that came in at that time was higher than the actual program of what was in existence in Florida. And the population in Florida was 3 times. I was able to logically decrease the fiscal note in that manner. That might be something to look at as to the cost to other states that have it implemented. I would also, when we worked on this, Fort Scott implemented it. Since we couldn't get it passed statewide, they took it upon themselves to create a sales tax holiday on school supplies locally. I thought that was interesting. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that explanation about the fiscal note, and I would just, for the committee's benefit and anyone listening online, mention that when Fort Scott, which is, by the way, close to where I grew up in Bourbon County, when they implemented that, someone, the merchants, still had to remit the sales tax portion to the state. So it was the merchant that took the hit to try to incentivize people to stay in Fort Scott to make purchases there.
Right, and they were willing to do so in order to keep people home shopping. Yes, thank you. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
Committee, our next conferee is Senator Dahl via WebEx. Oh, all right. It says.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee, for allowing me to testify to this bill. Happy birthday. They always seem to come around the same time each year, don't they? This is something like. I think that Senate Bill 432 is a very good bill right now. And the reason being is, you know, our estimates have come in over budget for a year and a half or whatever. But not only, you know, there's no question that how it will help the families. Purposely, when I ask, you know, I worked with Senator Peck with this, but when I asked this, you'll see that this bill included a lot of different things that most bills didn't. I wanted Kansans to be better than Oklahoma's, Missouri, or Texas. That's why there's more things included in ours than what's in theirs. So that was a reason why we had this. You know, I have a city, a county chair, seat that is closer to 3 capitals than it is to Kansas. It's closer to Oklahoma City. It's closer to Santa Fe and Denver. A lot of these people go to Texas. This was before, because Texas is 40, 30 miles away from this place, and they've been going to Texas. So, you know, when I was looking at this bill, I wanted to also be Texas. I want Texans to come up to Kansas. The other thing that I really liked about this bill at this time was we're coming through a pandemic, and our local businesses, our mom and pop stores, have suffered a great deal. Any way that we can get customers to come into their stores, any way that we can help as a government, that's what government to me is for, is to help people help themselves. And I think this bill will help our struggling businesses by bringing people in to shop because of this holiday. Inflation, you know, is soaring. What we're doing in Washington is going to make it, it's going to go higher. This families are the ones that get hit hard. I always thought that when I was in city government, if we didn't give city employees at least a cost of living raise, that they were going to lose money. I mean, that their salary, their buying power actually goes down. This will help those kind of people. You know, you can't fault Senator Peck. I don't even try. I mean, the guy's Senator Peck, one in a million. I love the guy, and so I'm not going to try to. He described it as well as it can be described. I'd be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Solentrop. Yeah, Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here, Senator Dahl. I read through the bill, but I didn't pick it out. Does this also waive local sales tax?
No. Yeah, there again, I had some differences with different people. You know, we all have our own beliefs and strengths and weaknesses. I'm a big local control guy. I would hope they would do what Fort Scott did, but I think that was a decision that that city needs to make itself.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And if I may, we may need to amend the bill to make it optional. That would be a great idea for local. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be very brief. And I'm very sympathetic, Senator, to you and Senator Peck's plight. I mean, because your districts, I mean, they border other states. And talk a little bit more about just how much commerce basically your area loses by people going across the border. I mean, I assume that's a really big deal for you, but just, could you talk about that a little bit more? Thank you, Madam Chair. That'll be my final question.
My district bumps up against Colorado and it bumps up against Oklahoma. You know, I'm down in that corner. And we have Amarillo is close. We have Colorado Springs is close. We have Pueblo that's close. The competition's big. And for a lot of us, I've seen it and I don't understand it, but I don't pretend to understand it. The girls, the wives will get together and they will take a trip to Amarillo or Colorado Springs to do their shopping. As a husband, you just say, have a good time. That's how you stay married 39 years. So the impact is significant. Dollar amount, you know, when the questions were being asked, you know, I don't know what Colorado does. I don't care. I don't know what Oklahoma does. I don't care. I know what Kansas needs to do, and this is a good bill for what Kansas needs to do, in my opinion.
Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for being here today. You know, one of the things that you and I have talked about before, the most difficult time for a family is the start of the school year. It is the most stressful time because parents have to make sure that their kids are enrolled. Then they get a list that is truly a lengthy list of all the supplies they're supposed to take in. I'll never forget being with all the new kindergarten parents and being told, one of the parents said, what's this envelope for and what's this list for? And we were all first-time kindergarten parents. And the teacher said, well, the envelopes for your check that you need to turn in before your child starts school, those are the fees. And the list is the supplies that your child is to bring in the first day. And the parents were pretty upset. They're like, wait a minute, this is public school. It's free. Every parent that enrolls their kid in public school knows it's not free. So they've got the list of supplies they need. They have to pay the enrollment fee, the textbook fees, even for kindergartners. And then new clothes, new shoes, all of those things to be ready. So this is a wonderful thing. It's long overdue. I appreciate both of the senators bringing it before us. It will make a difference for families. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I would like to, I went to as we all did, we travel our districts. I went in Elkhart, I was talking to a friend of mine in Elkhart, he runs the bank there. He said if this thing passes, they could literally go buy a lot of supplies for the kindergarten kids and such, so they could, that's what they were going to do. That was one of the things that they could do, and this would help that a lot.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a final question for you, Senator, maybe for Senator Peck, if you'd like to opine. I'm kind of curious. So to me, one of the problems with this bill is from the streamlined sales tax issue is that it's like, it has a start and a begin and an end date, right, each year. Was there any consideration made by you or anybody else you're aware of, Senator, that basic would say, what if we really just narrowed the items specifically for school, like pencils, notebooks, I mean, things, and just made that sales tax exempt year round? Is that possibly another way maybe to get at some of this stuff, to keep some of that school sales here in Kansas? Thank you, Madam Chair.
We could do whatever you guys want to do. I mean, but my thing was I didn't want it narrow. I wanted to beat Colorado. I wanted to beat Oklahoma. I wanted to beat Missouri. That's why I had such a broad list. I don't want to mess with it. But however we do, however we can help our families, I'm in. I mean, that's simple for me. But however you guys want to do it. You know, Senator Peck and he came and underlined some of the things that we had in that bill, and I chuckled. I said, I don't have that in Missouri, you know, so that's kind of why I did it.
Committee, any other questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other that would like to testify as a proponent? Seeing none, committee, there's no written testimony. Is there anybody that would like to testify as an opponent? Seeing none, there is no written testimony either. Committee neutral? Seeing none, and there is no written neutral testimony. Committee will close the hearing on Senate Bill 432. We do have a few minutes left. Committee, we brought up the topic of Senate Bill 431 last week. I don't know if you would be prepared or if you would like to wait on that legislation. It looks like I'm getting a wait signal, so we will wait on that legislation. Committee, I know it's unusual. Would anybody have objection if we looked at the two bills that we had hearings on today? No objection? Committee, let's take those up then. See if we can expedite the process a little. Committee, what are your wishes on Senate Bill 463? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I did have a question on 463. I thought about asking Mr. McNeely. I thought about asking the reviser. I didn't ask anyone, so I will ask now. As far as administration of this, if they collect, and I suppose this would be for our reviser now, but whomever in the room can answer it. If a retailer collects, for simple figuring, $10,000 in 1 month of sales tax, they would remit $9,700, and basically they would just keep up to $300 or 1.5% of that. Is that correct? So there would not be sending the full amount to Department of Revenue sending money back, I guess is my question.
That would be correct. That's the intent of the bill. They would just keep up to the maximum of $300 per month.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Pardon? They came back. I think his question's answered, that it would just be subtracted from the amount that they send into the state. That's the intent. Committee, any other questions? Amelia, would you say that's how the bill's written?
Yes, when I look at the language of the bill, it provides that it would be allowed as a credit to the remittance of 1.5% of the remittance, but shall not exceed $300 per retailer per month.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To move the process along, I would make a motion that this committee pass out Senate Bill 463 and recommend it favorably for passage by placing it on the consent calendar.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Solentrop. Senator Baumgardner.
Just a question that I don't think was asked with regard to the programming. It's stated by Mr. Profit that the programming that was needed for this would be done internally. Do we have a time frame on how long that would take?
Kathleen, do you have any idea? Thank you.
Well, they indicate, Department of Revenue indicates that it would require a total of $98,645 from the State General Fund in fiscal year 2023 to implement the bill, update forms and publications, and to make IT system changes. But it also indicates that if implementing the changes is too short, additional expenditures from outside contract programmer services beyond the department's current budget may be required. And I was just curious if the department seriously looked at how significant those IT changes would have to be and what we're looking at for a time frame. I don't want to pass another bill where we find out next session that it wasn't implemented because revenue wasn't able to do that.
Kathleen.
Madam Chair, I believe with each piece of legislation that passes, we do provide information as to whether we can implement the bill or not. And based upon the costs that are associated with this provision and the date of January 1, 2022, as to when this would begin, it would begin July 1 of 2022. It would go into our legislative release and we would get it into production as soon as we could, which would be the effective date of the bill. So we would be ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sure. Thank you, Kathleen. Any other discussion? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just my feelings on this is that I'm extremely sympathetic to the good senator's position he brought, particularly, we're working 432 first, is that correct or not? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. With regards to Senate Bill 463, Madam Chair, I do not think it's appropriate to put this on the consent calendar. I am very, to me, this basically says, I don't understand why this committee passed out a food sales tax bill last week, would not put that on the consent calendar, and that they're going to pass this out and put this on the consent calendar.
Senator,
I'll be voting no. Thank you.
I would remind you of the rules. That bill was amended. Amended bills cannot go on the consent calendar. Otherwise, I would have loved to put it on the consent calendar. So if there's an amendment on a bill in committee, it is not allowed to go on the consent calendar, just for the committee's reminder. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nevertheless, I still think it's inappropriate to put it on the consent calendar because this, to me, says this as a priority over the sales tax food bill we passed out last week, and I believe it does not. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I would remind everyone the consent calendar is of bills of a non-controversial nature. There was no controversy on this, no objection, working in it in advance. So with that, any other discussion? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not trying to make this a controversy, but I think what comes out of the tax committee sends a message. And quite honestly, we just passed a monster eco-deval bill last week with votes from Republican supermajorities in both chambers. We know the price tag on that. And what really bothers me is now we start basically passing out additional tax incentives, putting them on the consent calendar for business interests, And as far as I know, the legislature in neither chamber has acted anything on tax policy for citizens. That's my concern. That's the point I want to make. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you. Not to belabor it, but we do not know the cost of that bill that was passed last week. We do not know the cost, and we won't know for some time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And committee, I would bring this to your attention. I know it hasn't been discussed. I have brought it up publicly. But what was interesting was that economic development bill was a tax bill. And 6 of the 9 tax committee members voted no on that legislation. That bill should have come through this committee. I think you would have seen a better product, a different product. Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, again, as stated in the second bill we heard, there's been a lot of businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic. And just to cut them a little bit of slack on the costs it takes to remit these taxes ought to be voted 40-0. This is a small token appreciation for the effort that our businesses put forth to have major volumes of tax come into this state. So this should be without controversy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would remind everybody that is the intent of the consent calendar, is non-controversial bills. So, committee, what are your wishes? We've got a motion before us. If the maker of the motion would like to consider it, or we can take a vote on this motion. Okay. Committee, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Would you like to be recorded? So I need to confirm, just a second. Okay. Thank you, committee. Motion carries. We're out of time. Thank you, guys. We will pick up the other bills that we've heard later this week. Again, is there any other business to be brought before the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned.